Hey folks, Jackdaw here. So, the Blood of Dawnwalker. The internet has already labelled it The Witcher with Fangs. And on the surface, you can see why. The same director, same core Witcher team. Same muddy boots, medieval Europe vibe. But the closer you sink your teeth in, the faster the comparisons start to bleed out. This is a game built around a Jekyll-and-Hyde protagonist, a 30-day timed deadline, and a narrative sandbox where you lose quests because you chose others. It's the first chapter in a brand new dark fantasy saga that these devs finally get to write themselves, so let's start where it all begins. Dawnwalker awakens with a name that was never mortal to begin with. Rebel Wolves, a studio formed in 2022 by Konrad Tomaskowicz, the game director behind The Witcher 3. He left CD Projekt Red with a small pack of veterans from the core Witcher team. Devs who had lived and breathed Slavic folklore and made The Witcher's beasts, branching narrative, and world building all work as one. People who ultimately knew exactly what defined a dark fantasy world, rooted in deep, raw, and tragic human stories. Now, Rebel Wolves announced themselves rather quietly. No Keanu Reeves' breathtaking moment, they merely said a few simple things. A mature, dark fantasy narrative sandbox, AAA action RPG, medieval Europe, Unreal Engine 5, a new IP, we'll see you soon. And then poof, they vanished into development. 2 years later, on the 22nd of October 2024, they arose from the shadows with a Bandai Namco publishing deal. They would handle global distribution, physical and digital, PC and the current gen consoles. Dawnwalker finally had someone to feed it. And corporate PR niceties aside in this article, it actually reads a lot more like relief. Rebel Wolves had pedigree and vision, but not the infrastructure to launch globally, whereas Bandai Namco had the reach, the resources, and a vested interest in adding a Western dark fantasy to their lineup. So ultimately, a match made in heaven, or whatever the Dawnwalker appropriate afterlife is. A couple of months later, in early January 2025, under an actual full wolf moon that their marketing team timed a little too perfectly to feel accidental, Rebel Wolves finally pulled back the curtain on what they had been building in those silent 2 years. And thus we were given a cinematic trailer, which opened in an alternative 14th century Europe, drowning at the height of the Black Death. Dawnwalker's setting, Vale Sangora, sits high in the Carpathian Mountains, the long spine of peaks cutting through what we would consider modern-day Poland, Slovakia, Ukraine and Romania. Now a place where fear decides who lives and who doesn't. And the opening shot very much made that clear. The valley's human lords have started hunting anyone showing signs of plague, convinced the only way to stop the spread is to kill the sick. Coen, that is us, our main protagonist, is running through the forest with his younger sister, Lunka, in his arms. Completely feverish and barely conscious, she is marked for death and the hunters are closing in. Then the tone shifts, and a cabal of vampires fall on the hunters. What this world calls them, the Vrakhiri, not ballroom predators or gothic aristocrats, a clique of vampires who have waited centuries for their chance to stop answering to human rule. Their rise begins when the human rulers falter, a vacuum opens and these four take their chance. As we know so far, Brentsus leads them. Once Caeso Burianus Laurentius, a Roman noble born in AD 131, raised for the Senate and destined for power. Immortality only sharpened that instinct. Every move is calculated, centuries of ambition finally focused on claiming the valley. Xanthi is next. She is older than the language Coen speaks. A forgotten Greek priestess with a body shaped by centuries and a mind tuned to things no one else hears. She kills with blood that boils or snaps like a whip. Ambrose brings the polish, armor gleaming, hair perfect. The noble he always wanted to be, but underneath that is a boy formed by humiliation. Vampirism gave him a way up. His elegance hides spite. Every strike settles a score. Lastly, Bakir, who is the opposite. He's Brancis's warhound, brutal before vampirism ever touched him. As a human, he rode the Central Asian steppes, burning villages to ash. Vampirism simply gave his violent structure. By the time the human lords' bodies had hit the ground, the power struggle of the Vale had already shifted. Now Coen begs the vampires to save Lunka, his sister, and Brancis answers by cutting his palm and forcing his blood into her mouth. Not an immediate cure, but a claim. Whatever she becomes after this, it links her fate to his as much as to Coen's. With the bodies cooling in the snow, Brancis declares his rule over the valley he has watched from the shadows for centuries. Human lords are finished, a new order begins under vampire rule. This is the Blood of Dawnwalker, the first chapter in what Rebel Wolves is calling their own dark fantasy saga. At the centre of at least this one stands you, Coen, a young man caught in the aftermath of that night in the forest. Not fully human, not entirely vampire. A Dawnwalker, stuck between two worlds, both unwilling to fully accept him. Now game director Comrade frames Coen as a Jekyll-and-Hyde figure, but without the old good versus evil split. As he told PC Gamer, this kind of dual hero is everywhere in pop culture, yet surprisingly untouched in games. And this cinematic trailer's tagline spells it all out. The world will need what it fears. Coen is exactly that. Now, as much as the vampires are a real opposition for Coen, time is actually Dawnwalker's real threat. It doesn't move unless you make a meaningful choice. You can explore, you can fight, but particular objectives and quests will push your clock forward. Each one has a cost. With 30 days total, you cannot see or experience everything. Replayability comes with this sacrifice. And so your version of Coen is shaped by what you were able to do, but also what you had to let go. Now, a couple of months later, on the 8th of June 2025, we got a new story trailer that revealed what the devs mean by this being an alternative 14th century. And Coen just lays it all out himself in narration. In this world, monsters didn't creep out of folklore, they were always here. They coexist. And when the Black Death came and gutted Europe, when humanity was stretched thin and terrified, that is when this cabal of vampires stepped into the light. But not merely to slaughter the survivors, but to rule over them, to turn people into compliant, docile cattle. Now, Coen says at one point, which wasn't in the cinematic trailer, they tried to turn him too. However, when they did try to change him, something went wrong, or right. He became something else, a problem for both sides. Now, this game trailer ended by teasing the first 20-minute gameplay demo on the 21st of June 2025. That showcase locked in the big details, Dawnwalker aiming for a 2026 release and is up for wishlisting on Steam. But most importantly, it actually showed the game running. Proper pre-beta footage, the world, movement, combat, the human day versus Vampire Knight split working in situ. That did more for the game than any other announcement, so let's talk about it. Now, this showcase jumped straight into Coen on the road, who is hunting for a legendary sword buried beneath the capital city Svatra. And it's here where he runs into a bandit camp, our first look at human combat. Sword in hand, he fights the way his father taught him. Directional swings, reading stances, exploiting openings. Blocks and parries then build up activational charges, which fuel active abilities like Burning Blood, a hex that eats flesh over time, and Artery Attack, a clean, almost surgical, very satisfying decapitation. Combat as a human is fast, close, brutal. There are no bows, no crossbows, no cheap-ranged safety net. There is magic, however. But if Coen loses his sword, he keeps fighting with grit and his fists. Rebel Wolves also made space for different playstyles. On easier settings, the animations will slow down, giving you more time to read attacks without turning enemies into sponges. It stays reactive without being completely punishing. After the fight, we see Coen's 3 skill trees: human, vampire, and shared. You will grow both halves of Coen. You will never fully abandon one one skill tree for the other. With new skills unlocked, he enters Svartrue through Silberkreis, the wealthiest district near Griefberg Castle, which Brensis actually killed the human lord who once ruled this castle in the original cinematic. You know, the one who was originally hunting Coen and his sister that we talked about at the start? So like in one awkward dynamic, Brensis did save our lives, but now he's also ruling over the entire valley. Probably worse than what the human lords were doing. So kind of doomed if we didn't, doomed if you do kind of narrative setup. Either way, Coen will have to storm this castle eventually plot-wise. You could try now. It is suicide, but it is possible. The freedom is there. The game will let you write your own successes and disasters into the story. And the capital city of Svartrue really breathes. Merchants, priests, scholars. Also, otherworldly creatures that aren't entirely human. Vampires are not the only unnatural power in Vale Sangora. Every intelligent species has its very own niche, its own hunger, and you will feel that tension as you walk upon every cobblestone. At the city's very great cathedral, with stained glass and frescoes Brensis has ordered sealed, Coen finds a clue, but he can't reach it in daylight. He will need nightfall. And when night comes, everything shifts. Coen's vampire abilities ignite. Shadow Step, Claw Ride, movement that feels predatory. The clock moves forward. And as much as Coen's nature changes, night reveals a different Vale Sangora. Rooftops, shadows, prey. Coen can feed on NPCs. He can take a little bit, he can take too much. Kill or spare. Animals are also options if your conscience wins out. The game gives you the morality, you just get to draw the line. Using the ability Plane Shift, Coen scales the cathedral and slips inside. Waiting for him is Xanti, the oldest Vrakhiri, the one who boiled a man from the inside in the trailer. She is flanked by blood-tainted guards. Now dialogue can take different turns, but tonight ends with violence. Combat with claws is the go-to when a vampire, though you can use a sword if you'd like. When the blood guards fall, Xanti descends. She strikes with blood whips, drains and restores herself, and only drops her guard when her stamina breaks. Beneath her health bar, a timer for boiling blood ticks down. If it hits 0, Coen explodes, popping like a ripe pomegranate. And Coen dies here. This fight is beatable early. You can grind, return, or abandon it entirely. Dawnwalker makes no distinction between main and side quests. Only the 30 days you have and how you choose to particularly spend them. Now on the 13th of November 2025, very recently, Rebel Wolves released a new gameplay breakdown that showed what the last few months of community feedback has actually changed. The hub itself has been reworked since June. The camera has adjustable and separate view settings for exploration and combat, a smoother flow to fights, and the whole segment now walks us through a very different path through the Svartrue Cathedral quest. Coen this time arrives at the cathedral as a human, still searching for the legendary sword hidden beneath it. We learn a bit more about the lore here. Many crowds gather in churches across the Vale for the blood mass ritual, where citizens essentially, quote, donate their blood to Brensis as an act of devotion. Quite literally midnight mass. Inside the cathedral, the deacon offers Coen information. Of course, he has his own motives, but the lead is useful. And this quest shows the time system clearly being used. In daylight, as a human, Coen can use hexes, but the game now makes the price more clear. You see, every spell drains a part of Coen's health. Magic is carved straight out of you. When he uses Compel Soul on a corpse covered in moths, we get to see how and why this system matters. Because only Coen as a human can use magic, like speaking to the dead or a variety of other spells. Vampire Coen cannot. However, has a very much different array of abilities. Both halves serve different parts of the story. Literally, the contrast as playing between night and day. At this point, Coen begins to investigate the murals in the cathedral, which all point towards Saint Mihai, the man tied to the sword Coen is hunting. Now, while Coen can get the key from serving this quest with the deacon, we also see at night the library becomes a lot more accessible. Clearly, the librarians don't care for their books after hours, however, it reveals further clues as a vampire, which lead Coen down to the crypt, and of course, opening this crypt consumes more time. Inside, Coen finds his legendary sword, however, he finds Saint Mihai himself. buried alive beneath the cathedral. The reasons why are scattered throughout the quest as the devs encourage us to experiment and find out ourselves. Thus ends the extra half of the gameplay demos we have so far. Now, in a separate video interview, senior quest designer Patrick Fiakowski offered very simple advice to all of us. He said you can min-max, but he does ask us to enjoy the game, at least on your first playthrough, to experiment. They have put a lot in this game, and it reacts in ways that you wouldn't expect. So just let the game breathe and see where it takes you. You might actually be surprised. And that wraps up everything I believe you need to know about the Blood of Dawnwalker right now as we rev up for the Game Awards and of course this game's 2026 release window. But of course, to answer a question that has been set up across this video and just online, is the Dawnwalker the Witcher with Fangs? Roughly, no it's not, and the Gamescom previews pretty much kill that idea fast. Game Informer walked in very much expecting what we all assume, a Witcher clone with a little bit of a vampire flavouring. However, they walked out of that preview talking about nighttime, wall running, blood-fueled abilities, and a cathedral lit by two moons. Publication CGM fixated on the whole detective work and the moral split in Coen's identity, and MMORPG zeroed in on the 30-day time limit and called it the fix to open world urgency that The Witcher never solved. The same quest played two completely different ways. Day Coen investigates, casts hexes, talks to deacons and monks, reads corpses, whereas Night Coen infiltrates, shadow steps across rooftops, and fights like a feral creature. And that 30-day deadline changes everything. You're not clearing the map, you choose your route. You lose quests because you picked others. Your version of Coen becomes defined by sacrifice. Magic hurts, hunger will dictate your behavior, and clues shift depending on when you arrive. So it is very much familiar developers and a familiar genre, but different structure, different systems, and different stakes that are theirs alone. And so based on those initial previews and what we've seen, Dawnwalker isn't The Witcher with a vampire protagonist. It's what happens when these devs finally get to write their own thing instead of adapting Sapkowski's work. And you know what? I'm convinced and I'm very much excited by that prospect alone. Hopefully we will see more very soon at the Game Awards and in the marketing run-up to 2026. You know, I believe there is a full wolf moon every January, so that would also be an occasion to see even more about Dawnwalker. But of course, you are already in the right place for the latest on all manners of RPGs, but especially dark fantasy RPGs. Those are my shtick, and so I'll be covering as many as I can sink my teeth into. But until the next one, I've been Jackdaw, and I should go. Whoa, 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 whoa.